everyone, and welcome to the BDO Accessibility Spotlight. My name is Mandy Crespo, and I'm the manager of Accessibility Consulting Services at BDO Canada. I'm a middle-aged female with brown shoulder-length, chin-length hair. I'm wearing a plaid blazer and a dark blue shirt underneath. Thank you for joining us at our conversation here that highlights accessibility across Canada. The goal of the BDO Accessibility Spotlight is to provide a glimpse into the great work being done to remove barriers and be inclusive of persons with disabilities. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to the host of the BDO Accessibility Spotlight, Max Breaux. Max is the Vice President of Accessibility Consulting Services at BDO. He's been a strong voice in accessibility for over 25 years and has made contributions to accessibility in Canada in many, many ways. Before joining BDO, Max was instrumental in guiding the federal government towards adopting Bill C-81, which is now the Accessible Canada Act. Welcome, Max.
Well, thank you very much, Mandy. I'm going to give a brief description of who I am. I'm sitting in my home office, so behind me is kind of a closet full of games and some scarves and things. But I'm a gentleman in his 53 years old with a gray hair, round blue glasses. I'm wearing a purple top with a kind of a funky kind of colored bow tie. Thank you, Mandy, for the introduction. I would like to take the opportunity today to say we have a very unique guest on our show, and I'm very proud that we were able to find time to interview her and have a conversation with her. I would like to tell you that our guest today is Stephanie Cadieux. Did I pronounce that right, Stephanie? I hope so. And one of the things I'm really excited about is that Stephanie is going to be paving a way for many generations to come. She became the first chief accessibility officer. This happened about on May the 2nd of 2022. She was appointed to a 4-year term as I said, the first chief accessibility officer. Before her appointment, Ms. Cadieux was a member of the Legislative Assembly for British Columbia for 13 years, from 2009 to 2022. She's a member of the disability community and has used a wheelchair since the age of 18. Her lived experience gives her a deep understanding and the unnecessary barriers faced by people with disabilities and the cost of these barriers to our collective well-being. On top of all of this, she finds time on top of her career to be an advocate for people with disabilities, but she's also the president of Real Wheels Theatre in Vancouver. And I expect everybody listening to this to go and buy tickets to the next show that she's putting together, reflecting her love of theater and arts. And she's also a firm believer that society, we can no longer afford to accommodate inaccessibility and must challenge the outdated mindsets and unconscious bias of every opportunity we have. Before I start asking her some questions, I want to just highlight what I'm trying to do in this conversation. And one of the things we want to do is explore the details of her role and what falls into this jurisdiction of hers. And we're going to define a little bit of what that is and what it looks like. So I have a few questions because I really want to understand where she's focusing on. And I hope to touch upon her activities, what she's working on with various partners and in the public and within the federal public scope, and to demonstrate how will this be accomplished. And finally, does this role encourage discussions about accessibility? I hope it does. So welcome on board. Before I start any questions, do you have anything you want to bring up, or do we?
Thanks, Max, and let me just introduce myself to those who may not be able to see me. I'm a middle-aged woman with brown shoulder-length hair, dark-rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a ice blue shirt today, and behind me on my wall is a beautiful piece of First Nations art depicting a person using a wheelchair. And just a little correction to the bio. I am not currently the president of the theater. That was a number of years ago. I haven't had time for that kind of focused volunteering for many years, although I like to be very engaged in my community. And certainly I am an avid theater goer. So I will leave it with that.
That's awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. And by the way, I did not know that that painting in the background was an individual in a wheelchair. I now see it. Now that you mention it, that is awesome. Really need to get that artist name from you and see if we can get something over here. So, and are you okay if I address you as Stephanie, if that's okay?
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Stephanie, you've been in this role now for, I calculated around 14, 15 months now. And I know that you've been really active talking to a lot of people, going around trying to understand this role. And, unlike anybody else that's going to come after you, you're really setting up this role. So you're kind of setting up that benchmark. And due to that, I just have some questions about that. So with the establishment of this role, is this role a good indication to us in Canada to say that, the core business value and is addressing accessibility, is going to be looking at accessibility? And does this go way beyond just mere compliance, in your opinion?
Yeah. I am first. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's not. But there's certainly challenges with being the first in a role, because it is about defining what this can be. But it's exciting. And, I'm not new to the world of disability or accessibility, certainly. I've been playing in this sandbox for 30 years. And I'd say that for many companies and executives and leaders, inclusion has been a core business value for some time. But values are one thing, Max. Putting them into action is quite something different. Upholding them requires more work. And I think that the establishment of the Chief Accessibility Officer, CAO role, speaks to the fact that it's about more than just having a plan and making a commitment. Our government is saying we are making a big commitment, both with the Accessible Canada Act and the enshrining of this role in the Act. I'm there to monitor progress and identify and bring light to challenges and emerging issues that are impeding progress along the way, and help as well to identify solutions. So again, as I said, it's a role that was specifically written into the Act as an independent advisor to the minister responsible. So the minister responsible currently is the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and People with Disabilities, Minister Kara. And I'm there to champion accessibility throughout the public service and throughout federally regulated industries. So the private sector that's federally regulated, like airports, aircraft, airlines, telecoms, and banks, for example. And the position really is about promoting that culture change that we need to see, because culture eats strategy for breakfast, as they say. Enforcing compliance and having standards and regulations, that's all needed, for sure. But without an understanding of why we're doing this, and without people bringing that into their culture and their daily way of doing things, change is going to be really difficult. We need to foster a culture that fully embraces inclusion and accessibility and understands the depth of and the value that actually brings, not as a must do, but as we want to do this.
So let me clarify for the people who are watching this and listening to this. So your role goes way beyond just the federal government, right? So your role is you're going to be talking to companies like Capital One and Bank of Montreal and companies like TELUS and Rogers, and all these kind of companies that we're all familiar with in Canada. So your role is to connect with them, make sure they understand the role of accessibility, what they need to do to be moving forward on this, and championing that within themselves, like encouraging them to do so. So, up until recently when we were talking, I always had just a singular vision for you. I always thought you were just dealing with the government. So thank you very much for explaining that. I think, that really defines your role on a much greater scope, by the way. And my second question might allude to helping you, answer this next question is, how are you working with outside organizations? I mean, as well as I do that there's this whole ESG movement, which is basically environment, social, and governance. And one of the big key components of that is that the organizations that embrace ESG, want to buy from other organizations that embrace for ESG. So I'm looking at this as an accessibility kind of concept, right? Like, are you working with organizations to make sure that they're embracing accessibility and then also purchasing goods and services from organizations that are embracing it as well, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of your role.
Well, procurement of goods and services and facilities is a priority area under the Act. So all of the entities that are regulated by the Act are going to have to think about that. Accessibility is going to have to be considered throughout the process of identifying suppliers and the types of products and services that we buy. So I'll be watching what government and companies are doing. There's a lot of focus on this already. Certainly the private sector and government sectors have been thinking about this for some time and trying to figure out how they're going to work that into their procurement processes. But for example, my own office isn't going to be procuring anything from a provider that doesn't understand and value inclusion and accessibility, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to provide the services that we require. And so I think as organizations are developing calls for proposals and statements of work, that's going to be an important factor now that gets included. And I would encourage more companies to sort of really make accessible procurement a part of their business values. That sort of connects back to your last question, but if we aren't prepared and we're not thinking this way, and we're not investing in the training and understanding that we need to develop, then we're not going to be ready to serve the needs of customers or employees. And all of it ties together. So definitely going to be talking about the procurement piece as a critical component of a broad inclusion strategy for companies and government.
Now, and your role is a lot greater than just procurement. Let's be honest here, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what are some of the areas in which you're hoping to influence change in, just out of curiosity?
Well, all of them. When we talk about a barrier-free Canada by 2040, that's the goal of the Act, and that's a major culture shift, and it takes time. And some things are easier to accomplish, right? We can switch to accessible documents and practice plain language, and we can use alt text in our social media. Those are things we have to do. We need to teach people how to do them. But once you know how to do them, it's not difficult, easy to make the change, not expensive, not difficult. But we're talking also about changes to infrastructure, to buildings, to how we deliver services, to what are our hiring practices, what kind of technology are we buying and investing in. And all of those things are going to take longer, and they're going to be ongoing. They're going to change, and they're going to need to be updated. And the reality is that we are, as the disability community, we are impatient for that change. I am as impatient as anyone on that. But I also recognize that there is a concern there. And one of my concerns is that there could be apathy and cynicism that develops if things aren't moving along as fast as we think they should. And that's a real possibility, and we can't let that happen. We have to keep up the momentum. We have to recognize that some of these things are going to take time. But one of my roles is going to be to promote and champion that we keep that accessibility top of mind. But while we do that, recognize that, sometimes we're not going to get it right, but we also need to celebrate the learnings that we have along the way, and foster understanding of the scope of the change that we're trying to see, that we are going to see over these years. And once we recognize that this is a process, and that we are learning and we are building, I think it's easier to stay engaged. But we have to, like I say, we have to celebrate successes along the way, the little ones and the big ones. We have to recognize the milestones and the progress that we're making, because we're talking about accessibility and inclusion everywhere, that we can't accommodate inaccessibility any longer.
Right. And one of your first public speeches for, I went and listened to it a few days ago. You said one thing that made me cheer, in the sense is that you said something really unique that I haven't really seen or heard from especially an official like you, or a person with a disability, pretty prominent like you, saying, don't be afraid to fail as well. Right. Like the progress is a lot of mistakes along the way. Right. And that, eventually you'll get there. So, take a mistake, learn from it, adapt to it, move on, right? And build towards that. And you said something like that, and it was like, that's it, right? That's part of the process, because even people like me, who's been in the business for 35 years as an advocate, I got to be honest with you, most of my successes are based on failures, right? And thank you for saying.
Yeah, if we're not making mistakes, then we're not trying hard enough. The reality is there's no progress without trial and error. And we have to recognize that accessibility for many is a bit scary. It's, I don't know if I'm going to do the right thing. I'm not sure how to do this. And what if I get it wrong? So I just don't want to do anything. Well, we don't want people to not do anything. Just because it might not be perfection overnight does not mean that you shouldn't start. Just start.
Right. Put one foot forward, or in our cases, put one wheel forward. Right. So my last question to you is, you have a lot of responsibilities on your plate, and I'm sorry, I'm going to make the role daunting here. And I hope I don't scare you from saying, oh, nuts, after talking to Max, I'm going to quit. But you have a lot of responsibility as being the first Chief Accessibility Officer. And, how are you, with this daunting task, going to make people aware? Like, are there special things you're going to be doing to make things aware, understanding the challenges of people with disabilities, and to a certain degree, do you have a plan to accomplish this? Like, what's your vision, if you can share a little bit of that?
Ooh. It's developing over time. What I have to do is provide a report to the minister every year on the progress that we're making. And so when I prepare that report for the minister, it will be tabled in Parliament and then made public. And that's going to sort of be that reporting out on, what am I seeing? Where are we going? What have we done? That's going to be the main sort of way we communicate that. But we're also talking on social media. We're talking to small groups, large groups. We're seeing things that are happening. We're going to over time produce some videos about examples of accessibility accessibility at work. There's no shortage of things to do, as you said, and how we get the message across will vary depending on audience, I think, over time, and how we focus. We ourselves, I myself, have all sorts of ideas of what we could do or should do, but we have to be realistic about what we can do as well. We're a small team, and we do have legislated responsibilities that we have to meet first.
Before I let you go, is there any comment you would like to say, or anything you want to say to the people who are watching this?
We're in it together, and accessibility is a journey, not a destination. As I said before, just start and ask for help. People with disabilities need to be included in this process. It's a fundamental key piece of the act, and there's good reason for it. And as you and I know, Max, bring people with disabilities into a workspace, into an environment, and you're going to get innovation, engagement, and better outcomes. And who doesn't want that?
That's well said. Stephanie, once again, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me. And it was much a pleasure to get to know you and to interview. I hope we talk many times in the future.
Thanks, Max.
My pleasure. As you know, Stephanie's involvement in the disability community, I got to know her from friends that lived in BC and spoke very highly of Stephanie. And when it was announced that Stephanie was going to be the first chief accessibility officer, I have to say I was not surprised. She has really big shoulders. She's got a really big task ahead of her, and I can't think of a better suited person for this role. And the more I think about her role, the more I think about how much I'm going to be watching her progress. And then I thought, that's a really unfair statement. I think all of us who are sitting here watching Stephanie in her role should, as she said, step up to the plate and be part of the process and help her evolve this country into being fully accessible. So I challenge anybody who's watching this, please take that role with responsibility. I know Stephanie's office is around to help you if you want to have some ideas on how to move forward. I know I'm around to do so. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today, and I hope your accessible journey meets with success. Thank you very much.